So I was looking at the traditional readings this week, and I was a little surprised to see this week they combined two of them. So some of the traditional readings are Lamentations 3 and Psalm 30. So I will confess it wasn't particularly spiritual or prayerful of me. I just thought it was interesting that they, pulled something out of Lamentations, which is pretty rare in the lectionary, because Lamentations is no fun. And in fact, they put two of them together. So I was kind of looking at these. I was interested to see the combination, as they're two very different types of prayer. The section from Lamentations, obviously Lamentations itself is a lament over the fall of Jerusalem. But if you cherry pick this section that they did, it's kind of a little more positive one, because it's this section that a lot of people think is kind of self-talk. In the midst of the despair, in the midst of just feeling just how awful situations are right now, it seems like the person's kind of slowing themselves down, as we sometimes do in hard situations. It's just kind of like, okay, like breathe, stay calm, don't freak out. This is what we know. This is what's going on. That just kind of coping mechanism. It seems like this section is kind of that. Like, okay, everything feels awful, but in the midst of it, we're going to say this about God. And then the other one is Psalm 30. Psalm 30, it seems like, was probably just a simple house blessing originally. When someone moved into a new house or built their own house, as they would have at the time it was written, people would come together as a community and pray over this new home, kind of this simple house blessing, though most people think that it's also one of the prayers and the blessings that was used over the various temples as they were being redone. So I thought that was kind of a neat combination of taking this kind of individual house blessing and turning it into a blessing over God's house as well, because it is a simple house where we meet with someone. It's just someone happens to be the cosmic God, which is amazing. So as I was looking at these two, they didn't jump out at me as this is why these two are connected. So I want you guys to try and figure it out with me this week. So I'm just going to read them together, and then I would love your guys' thoughts. So why did someone wiser and more spiritual than me think that there was a connection here? Is there a theme? Is there a certain feel? Why were this chapter out of Lamentations 3 and Psalm 30 connected? So you can do it kind of more Lectio style if you want to sit back, get comfortable. Remember that this is God speaking to us. Just see where your heart takes it. The Lord's kindness has not ended, for his mercies are not exhausted. They are renewed every morning. Great is your faithfulness. My portion is the Lord, I said. Therefore I yet hope in him. Good is the Lord to those who seek him, for the person who seeks him out. Good that he hopes in silence for rescue from the Lord. Good is it for a man that he bear a yoke in his youth. Let him sit down and be silent when he is set upon him. Let him put his mouth into the dust. Perhaps there is still hope. Let him offer his cheek to him who strikes him. Let him take his fill of disgrace. For the Lord will not abandon forever, and though he strikes with sorrow, he will show his great kindness. For he does not afflict on purpose and aggrieve the sons of men.
So what verses are those?
It is 22 through 33 in Lamentations. Chapter 3, 22 through 33.
Yeah.
This is Psalm 30. I exalt you, Lord, for you drew me up, and you gave no joy to my enemies. Lord my God, I cried to you, and you healed me. Lord, you brought me up from Sheol, gave me life from those gone down to the pit. Hymn to the Lord is faithful, acclaim his holy name. But a moment his wrath, life in his pleasure. At evening one beds down in weeping, and in the morning glad song. As for me, I thought in my quiet days, never will I stumble. Lord, in your pleasure you made me stand mountain strong. When you hid your face from me, I was stricken. To you, O Lord, I call, and to the Master I plead. What profit in my blood, in my going down deathward? Will dust acclaim you? Will it tell your truth? Hear, Lord, grant me grace. Lord, become helper to me. You have turned my dirge to a dance for me, undone my sackcloth and bound me with joy. And let my heart hymn to you, and not be still. Lord my God, for all time, I acclaim you.
Is that David?
Yes.
Thank you.
The did David write it is kind of a complex question.
Oh,
'Cause some of them were probably written for David, some of them were probably written to David, some of it was kind of claiming. So the David question's a little tricky, but yes, it does say a David song for the house is what the title is. What do you guys think? Did you see any kind of connection between those two? Is an attitude or a theme you heard?
I think they both say that God is faithful even during difficult times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, do these seem to be ones that are talking about things going well or things going poorly? Largely.
Doesn't seem like either one of them has experienced a whole lot of joy,
Right.
but it seems like they're saying, but based on past experience, I'm going to trust you because I know right now I'm not feeling or experiencing it, but I know it'll come because it has in the past.
Yeah, I think that was largely the theme I came up with as well. That we are going to choose to focus on faith. We're going to choose on trusting God, even though circumstances might say otherwise, right? The Lamentations is they're right in the midst of it, right? You're doing this self-talk thing, like, okay, God is faithful. God is about hope. God doesn't do these things for no reason, right? And you can kind of see it, like whether they're feeling it or not, they're kind of walking themselves through it. Whereas the Psalm, in some ways, is kind of, this is what my experience was, right? When I was doing well, these things happened, but also when they were poorly. And so, interesting to me that that's the house blessing, because I would have thought, like, Lord, be with this house, how we would do it, right? Mm-hmm. And yet, the house blessing is, in fact, something about who God's character is, how are we expressed in this house, even if we're not feeling it at the moment, right? Yeah. Is there anything else you guys pulled out?
Well, they both end up praising God, even though the circumstances may not be great.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least they are referring to circumstances that were not great in the past. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's important. I pulled out just kind of the reminder that it's not the prosperity gospel, right? This is not a promise that God is going to snap his fingers and everything's going to be okay. It's a promise that God will be with us in this, right? And how many times does it say in there, like, so I'll sit in silence. Oh, wait. There's actually positive things to be learned from the yoke. There's a bunch of different times, but never in there says that, it's always going to go well. It's always going to be easy. Although that's what I would prefer the gospel to be. And there isn't anything that God's going to fix this either, right? God's going to be with you in this. God is faithful. This is a season. There is something we'll outlast this, but these ones are rather lacking, and the God will fix it for you instantly. Go ahead.
There's a place in Jeremiah where it says, I tried to speak to you in your prosperity, but you wouldn't listen. So unfortunately, it's not like when things are going great, we're just thankful and focused on God. We tend to get focused on, our new boat or whatever it is, and sometimes prosperity is a hindrance to our spiritual life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that very last verse on the lament, he doesn't afflict on purpose or grieve. He doesn't want to. Even when he strikes with sorrow, he's going to show mercy, and I think that's an important one. Like, I just think if there's any other way to get our attention, I suspect God has tried it 10 times, and I wish that were not the case for myself so much of the time. Like, I won't listen when I'm comfortable, so sometimes we need something else, and that's kind of the natural way of the world.
And the way I've always phrased it is, I think God is as gentle with us as he can possibly be.
Mm-hmm.
If we hear him when he's gently correcting us and respond to that, great, because we've learned the lesson. But if we aren't, because he cares more about us than we do ourselves, he knows that he's got to free us from this stuff.
Doesn't say much about our willingness to learn
No.
based on some of the circumstances we see
Yeah, I
in
agree.
human life. But I agree.
I think too, it's such a good reminder of God's character in both of those. Just like he doesn't do these things on purpose to hurt us. There's so many people saying like, no, I'm in this place where I don't really know who God is right now, and I'm questioning everything, and how could this God do this? This is such a hopeful in that process of like breakdown, questioning. And so I have a lot of friends in that place right now where it's like, but God is this, this is not, he doesn't leave you, he doesn't forsake you, he has joy, he has abundance. And I think it's so easy to forget when you're in that place. But yeah, I think that's huge.
Well, and the motive is so important there too.
Yeah.
Like in the midst of it, God has all this thing, and then we can take it to that place. Well, it's my fault,
Mhm.
or it's God's fault. And
Mhm.
I don't think either of those are quite accurate. It's like I can use this, but this is kind of what life actually is. And but his heart is not in that. He's not
Yeah.
looking for excuses to harm
Right,
us.
okay.
Well, I'll make him more spiritual now, right?
Right?
I think the Bible's really, like God can use those things, but that's not where his heart's at.
Yeah.
I think he does desire to give us prosperity and good things. We just can't handle it most of the time.
Especially in the abundance he could give it too. I think our
Mhm.
brains would just like.
I was also interested in, someone pointed out, where is it, verse 24 in here, there's my portion is the Lord, I said, therefore I have yet hope in him. And that was likely, that phrase is stolen almost directly from the Exodus or Deuteronomy when the priestly tribe of Levi gets set aside, and he says, no, from now on their portion is me. They're giving up the land. They're giving up, security in a lot of ways, right? Because, having land, being able to grow your own food, you were saying year in and year out, God is going to provide enough food for me through other people. I don't get my hands on it. I don't get the hard work of trusting. And, they kind of made that change. And it's an interesting reminder to himself. And this phrase I was kind of thinking of, like, God is enough. Like, God's my portion at the end of the day. Those security things, those things we've been used to, those are gone, right? Can God still provide in this place, whether you're the priestly tribe that can't even produce your own food? You're stuck trusting God and for other people to do it. And, in both of these, right? Whether the circumstances feel right, whether they're so awful that you've lost your homeland, you've lost that land, to be able to remind yourself and say, my portion's God. Those other things can burn down. Those other things can be taken away. I just watched it happen, probably, for the poet, right?
Yeah.
My portion's God. Even right now, that can be enough.
And then it follows up saying, therefore I will wait for him.
Mm-hmm.
The corollary is it says God's portion is his people. And so he's our portion and we are his portion.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to what Candace was saying about people being in a place where they can't see clearly, I think that's, and I know I'm a broken record on this, because I bring it up at women's group a lot, but that's why it's so crucial, in my opinion, to study the Bible so that you know what God's character is, because you do have to hearken back to that, like Joe was saying. There are times when you can't feel it, you can't see it, you can't believe it, and yet if you are steeped in God's revelation of himself and you do hearken back to, well, he was faithful here, it enables you to wait for the Lord to show up in the situation, whatever it is. And the song we're singing about our roots going deep, I think I shall not be moved, kids don't know what that means, but just the roots planted by the river, that it can be sustained. Nothing up above shows that that's being sustained, but God is a rock.
I was trying to think of just kind of a metaphor to stick in our heads if I'm this side this week, and the one I came up with was when I used to swing dance in high school. I was young and strong, and the most fun thing to do was always to show off with the big aerial moves, right? And I was pretty good at throwing the girls around and impressing everyone. And the move that always brought down the house, the big one was at that time was the around the world. And so you throw girls up in the air and toss them back and forth, and then you'd whip them around your back, grab their knees, and then you could swing them around and then back up into your arms. And I always had to just talk with people before I did this. Okay, do you trust me? Do you recognize that I know what I'm doing? Because a lot of the stuff we were tossing them back and forth, and you have to have the things right. Those were actually the ones that you're most likely to get hurt in, because if they get their arms in the wrong places, they move their legs or something, they could get dropped, they could twist an arm or something. But the scariest move, hands down, was trusting their full weight to me, swinging me around their back. Their full weight was there, but by that point, you've gotten everything right. It's really unlikely you're going to get hurt on the big swing, because the momentum's with you. It's not that complicated on how your hands and things are doing. So I was like, how often is that true in life? These places where we feel like we have some control, I can't get hurt that much, but that's actually where the danger is. In the moment when we feel totally out of control is the moment when God is the most in control. It's the easiest moment to catch us. It just feels a certain way. And so I just always thought of how often God must feel like that. These poor girls, as I swing them around, their eyes come out, they're this big. But at that point, they were fine. I was not going to drop them. I'd have to be trying to mess up at that point. Momentum was on my side, everything was good. But it was all this stuff where they thought, this isn't so bad, I'm in control, where the real danger was. So that's what I was kind of thinking of this week, of the way it feels in the moment aren't necessarily always the same.
I had to write an article about that. Swing dancing with God.
That's right.
Yeah.
The dance, there's a fine tradition of
Bring it back
referring to God as the dance.
Trying to beat the rain.
Yeah.
Hi.
And then it rained in.
Common theme, that was something at our college. We weren't allowed to dance, but you could go off campus and go to swing dancing club.
Oh, is that right?
Oh,
It
that's
was our rebellion.
Oh, yeah. Well,
To be closer to
walking on
God.
the wild side.
I don't know, those Calvinists, I mean, I tell you what.
It's nice to see you, Lynn.
Hi, welcome. Yeah.
We're well.
Kind of the last thing I thought about in this week, these two, is both of these poems we're looking at were highly individual experiences, right? Someone writing about their experience in exile, someone writing about just their house and what is God. But both of these are actually public worship settings, right? These are both things that are written down and set so people could connect to God and understand who God is through individuals' experiences. And so I was just kind of thinking about, it's interesting, again, the reminder that our faith is never truly our own. These experiences we've had with God, these things we've learned about God, I think are always at the service of others, whether it's folks who understand who God is or not. These things we know about God, these things we've learned, are meant to form one another. So kind of my last two questions I would love us to think through is, how have you been formed by other people's stories and experiences of God? And do you have any experiences of God that are recent, that are big, important for you, that has either formed you, formed others, or something you kind of go back to, like this person? That's self-talk.